Welcome to In Focus with Ejaz Haider. Our top story tonight is about India fast-pacing testing and acquisition of weapon systems and platforms that will lead to further instability in an already unstable region. On Monday, India flight tested what it called the supersonic missile-assisted release of torpedo from Wheeler Island off the coast of Orissa. According to its official press release, all mission objectives, including missile flight up to the range and altitude, separation of the nose cone, the release of torpedo, and deployment of velocity reduction mechanism, were met perfectly in the flight test. The press release also called the test a major technology breakthrough for standoff capability in anti-submarine warfare. Last month, India tested an extended-range version of BrahMos cruise missile. The missile is developed and manufactured by an Indo-Russian joint venture firm called BrahMos Aerospace. While the existing version of the missile has a maximum range of 290 kilometers, the extended version, BrahMos, can strike targets more than 400 kilometers away. Last year in April, India conducted an anti-satellite test using an anti-ballistic missile interceptor. Given that India is ruled by a right-wing political party that overtly propounds a Hindu supremacist ideology and on whose watch India has seen relations deteriorate with all its neighbors, there are obvious and grave concerns that a region already unstable could see more instability. Another concern is that while the US-led Western alliance wants India to be part of the elite nuclear suppliers group and accorded India the membership of MTCR, which is the Missile Technology Control Regime, in 2016, India's actions continue to reflect a disdain for rules and a penchant for unilateral actions. To discuss this, we have with us Dr. Naeem, a former brigadier who also served as Director, Arms Control and Disarmament Affairs at the Strategic Plans Division, and Commodore Syed Ubaidullah, a defense and maritime analyst who had a distinguished career in Pakistan Navy. So let me begin with Dr. Salik here. Dr. Salik, as I said, there are a number of issues that we're going to discuss here. But let's first begin with India fast-pacing these acquisitions and the impact on stability in the region.
There's a pattern to it. India has always been the guilty party in introducing new systems. They were the ones who introduced nuclear technology in the subcontinent in the form of nuclear weapons. They were the ones who started testing the ballistic missiles and later on the cruise missiles. And now they are going into newer and newer fields. They introduced the maritime dimension to the nuclear competition in the region. And now with the assistance, very active assistance from its allied and friendly countries like the United States, Israel, and Russia. They are developing weapon systems which have got a very serious deep destabilizing potential. Although all these things are not ruffling any feathers in the West or in the United States, because they have made up their mind that whatever India is doing is to match China's growing capabilities and to neutralize China acting as a strategic counterweight to China, not realizing that this spillover effect of all these technologies will also affect Pakistan's security. So which will force Pakistan to take countermeasures that will mean the start of a new arms race in the region. Or secondly, it will also push Pakistan further into the Chinese orbit because at the moment, Chinese are very well advanced in these hypersonic technologies and all these technologies which Indians are introducing. So Pakistan may seek Chinese technical assistance if it cannot catch up with India on its own. So it's a very dangerous situation, and the Indians are going headlong into this without realizing the consequences of their actions.
Right. Quick, before I go to Commodore Ubaidullah, let's talk about specifically in this case. Of course, there are many other arms control fora and treaties, but let's talk about MTCR. As I said in my opening, India became a full member in 2016. Now, when they tested last month, when they tested this extended range BrahMos, which they claim goes up to about 400 kilometers, Interestingly, now that is something that actually breaches some of the provisions of MTCR. So give me a sense of, since you've worked so much on these issues, give me a sense of where exactly does MTCR stand, and how does India square its membership with the idea of developing these missiles?
First of all, we have to realize that MTCR is not a formal international treaty. It is just an arrangement between certain like-minded countries, and they decided not to export the missile technology to countries which they do not like, and so that they could control the proliferation of missiles. That was the initial purpose. There was the MTCR Part 1 guidelines, which prohibited the export of full missiles and missile systems, including the unmanned aerial vehicles and the space launch vehicles. Later on, they realized that there are other components which have dual use capabilities and which can be used to manufacture the missiles. So therefore, the MTCR Part 2 list came up, which talked of various critical components like the propulsion system, the rocket motors, etc. However, this has been very farcical, although Pakistan has been one of the major victims of MTCR. The treaty itself, the arrangement does not have any legal obligations for its members. Even if they violate it, there are no penalties for that. And there are no other penalties to any other country. But the United States itself modified its laws, and anybody there in their judgment is in violation of MTCR, they impose 2 years of sanctions on that particular entity or the country. And we have seen in the past that sanctions were imposed on China, on North Korea, and some of Pakistan's strategic organizations. However, the criteria which they fixed, that was the combination of range and payload, 300 kilometers range and 500 kilometers payload. Now, that is a very, very difficult thing to implement, because if, like the Indians and the Russians, they claimed the BrahMos range as 290 kilometers, who would actually measure it on ground, whether it is 290 or 300 or 320? Secondly, there is always a trade-off between the payload and range.
Correct.
You can reduce the payload and the range will increase. You can increase the payload and the range will decrease. So that trade-off is always there. Later on, they just simplified it and saying that any missile which is capable of carrying WMDs comes under the MTCR guidelines. But we have seen that in violation of all these guidelines, the BrahMos missile, which was a joint venture between Russia and the Indians, in fact, it was totally a Russian manufactured system. The Indians just painted their tricolor on it. And now they are claiming that the latest test which they carried out, they said that the missile body and the booster was Indian made. So rest everything is Russian made.
Yes.
So it has been in very clear violation of MTCR, but people very conveniently tended to look the other way.
Correct. Let me go to Commodore Ubaidullah. Commodore Ubaidullah, they're talking about supersonic missile-assisted release of torpedo. First, obviously, explain to our viewers what exactly does this mean, and then how is it, a technological breakthrough in terms of anti-submarine warfare?
That I think we should do to our viewers. Basically, it means that torpedo, which is anti-submarine weapon being used, how far can it be thrown in the water to be effective? The same torpedo can be fired from the ship right the next step into the water, and the same torpedo can be fired with the assistance of rocket to a distance of, let's say, 20,000 yards. And the same torpedo, when it is assisted by a supersonic missile, can be fired theoretically up to a range of 400 miles. So it is the payload which matters to the ultimate target of a submarine. To kill a submarine, a torpedo is needed, smart enough to look for it, go for it, and destroy it. Now, a question comes to mind as torpedo throwing with the assistance of rocket and missile, is it something very new in the world? The answer is no. For example, at this time, the Japanese have VL Type 7 vertical launch missile which can go up to 30 kilometers. Pakistan and United States Navy has ASROCs which are assisted, the same torpedo assisted by rockets and can go beyond 20 kilometers. And the Russians have a different kind of system which can go beyond 60 kilometers. So what is the difference now with supersonic missile-assisted release torpedo is the range. The advertised range of this particular type launch by the Indian Defense Research and Development Organization claimed to be 400 miles away. Now, is that kind of a system at this time exists elsewhere in the world? Well, the concept exists, but the ranges do not. The ranges of 400 mile, if and when achieved, will be definitely a breakthrough to that extent of ranges. The weapon payload which it carries will remain the same. Now,
so you are skeptical about the Indian claim. You're saying that they haven't reached that kind of range.
Well, neither they have declared the range nor they have told us that they have fired this from Abul Kalam Island, which is northeast of India, and from there at what range did it hit a target? Well, they have planned to hit a target at 400 miles, whether it was used at 300, 200, 100, and still they claim, well, this is up to them, but definitely it has enhanced the range of the torpedo for anti-submarine warfare from 60 at the moment available kilometers to over 560 kilometers, about 400 miles.
Right. So also a sense, or at least this is what some of the Indian analysts claim, that this is going to, sort of give a punch to the Indian Navy, and that this is primarily part of Indian Navy's sort of, desire to be a powerful blue water navy, and now given tensions with China and the Chinese Navy's flag projection, that this is an important asset now for the Indian Navy. So how do you look at that?
Yes, that you're absolutely right. This kind of ranges, or I should say this sort of aspirations for the Indian Navy, having an aircraft carrier in the early 60s, and then developing onto the nuclear submarines, etc., they are looking China as their main adversary, and these sort of weapons, which are missile-assisted torpedo with extended ranges, are meant to be, in my opinion, I can be wrong, towards China and not so towards Pakistan. But having said that, you see, the torpedo eventual payload, is it also available elsewhere on the platform? Thousands of miles away? Answer is yes. Both Pakistan Navy and the Indian Navy have some sort of smart torpedoes which can be fired from helicopter, which can be fired from LRMP, Long Range Maritime Patrol Aircraft. Indians have P-81 or Poseidon type of long-range maritime aircraft whose main job is to look for a submarine and also go for a kill. Similarly, Pakistan Navy has P-3 Orion, thousands of miles. It can fly 18 to 20 hours at a stretch without anything. And it has weapons, it has sensor. And you remember last two times, this 2019 as well as in 2017, Indian submarine was detected and seen on the surface in Pakistani or nearby Pakistani waters by Pakistan Navy P-3 Orion aircraft. And the difference between this and that, a pressing of a button, which takes fraction of a second. But of course, that was not a world scenario. And also government took a very mature decision, ordered Pakistan Navy not to go for a kill. Otherwise, this was not something special. The same torpedo could be fired from a height of 1,000 feet. So the distance really, it mattered a little.
Right. So one final question, Commodore Ubaidullah, and a quick response to that. In terms of allocations and in terms of, big ticket items and platforms, we have generally seen that Pakistan Navy has lagged behind, I would say, the Army or the Pakistan Air Force. So, and I asked this question because, as I said earlier, that the Indian Navy has its eyes on developing itself into a powerful blue water Navy. Now, in the event that we have a Navy that's at the most a brown water Navy, not even a green water Navy, what kind of deterrent effect does PN have in the event of a conflict with India?
I think, Mr. Ejaz, one has to remember that Pakistan Navy has never been in comparison with the Indian Navy gun for gun and missile for missile, both in 65 and 71 war. We were 1:3, 1:4 ratio. We continue to be that, or even the gap has increased. So as far as the physical capability is concerned, number of missiles, ships, submarine, aircraft, anti-submarine weapons, we will never be able to match that. But I want to bring this thing to your viewers' knowledge and remind them, and this was one of the questions which you asked me last time, that what about these big aircraft carriers? And India happens to be one of those countries in the world, of only less than 10 countries have this weapon, that they had in 1965 war and in 1971 war. And in both the wars, they had hidden this particular lethal weapon system of aircraft carrier inside their merchant navy, inside the harbor of Bombay in 1965 and in 1971 into Visakhapatnam. They could not, because of the fear of a navy which is 1/3 or 1/4, could not bring the ship into the open sea to fight a war out. So, as far as technological impact and the quality is concerned, I must tell your viewer, Pakistan Navy is one of the 7 navies of the world which has second strike capability. What it means is their submarine can fire a nuclear weapon, and this is only available to 7 countries in the world.
Right. Thank you so much. That was Commodore Syed Muhammad Ubaidullah speaking with us. Let me go back to Brigadier Salik here. Brigadier Salik, second strike capability, you have been one of those officers that remained involved with the development of nuclear strategic thought, not just after SPD was formed, but before that also. So what exactly has been our thinking in terms of deterrence? And would you say that would also require sort of allocating more funds to the Pakistan Navy in order for it to sort of, develop a credible second strike capability?
Ejaz, I'm very clear that what we have in place at the moment is a stopgap arrangement. This is not an ideal second strike capability because the range of Babur 3 missile, which is now installed on our submarines, is 450 kilometers. And in the maritime warfare, this is a rather small distance. There are very, very long distances involved in maritime warfare. So therefore, ultimately, The solution is that we would need to have our own nuclear-powered submarines because of their longer endurance and also greater speeds. And secondly, we'll also have to develop either a much longer range submarine launched cruise missile, at least a minimum of 1,000 kilometers or round about that, or we will have to develop a submarine launched ballistic missile. Only then we can claim that we have an assured second strike capability. The current arrangement is good enough for coastal targets, but it cannot hit any meaningful targets in the depth of India. So therefore, it will have limitations which we need to keep in mind and not be complacent about it, that, okay, we have got this capability, we don't need to go any further. I think we have to go further, and we must invest in that. And that's a very important area, because unless we have an assured second strike submarine-based capability, the credibility of our deterrence will remain in doubt in certain conditions.
Right. I am also joined by Dr. Kamran Bokhari, who is Director of Analytical Development at the Center for Global Policy. But before I get to Dr. Bokhari, one other question, Brigadier Salik, which has to do with the, as I said, the whole idea of stability and instability. So every time you talk to the Indians, they basically point to China and say, well, we are developing everything because of China. Now, up until developments this year, with tensions in eastern Ladakh, if you looked at their order of battle, it was primarily focused on Pakistan. 3 strike corps. Even now, they have only one mountain strike corps, which they raised in Jan 2014, which is dedicated towards China. 3 strike corps against Pakistan. So the point is that China is there. So how does one tell the world that these developments were specific to Pakistan, and that perhaps there's need for some kind of arrangement which, for instance, prohibits or bans development of certain weapon systems or platforms in order to, move the region towards some degree of stability?
First of all, Ejaz, I think we all know that there is no institutionalized, overarching restraint structure in South Asia. There are no nuclear risk reduction centers. The Pakistani proposal of strategic restraint regime has been turned down by India several times. And without any institutional crisis management and a restraint structure, the situation will remain tenuous. If you have followed the India-China standoff in Ladakh, you will find that despite all the tall claims Indians have been making, what have they used against China? It has been, in my opinion, mostly shadow boxing. They have been fist fights and using clubs and all these sophisticated weapons which they are testing and deploying. None of these has been used there, or even there has been any talk of use of these weapons. So basically, their orientation is still predominantly towards Pakistan. And then we also have to know that once a weapon system is available to a military, there is no bar on them to use it against country A or B. The weapons they ostensibly are trying to develop to be used against China, they do not carry red star marks, and they cannot be used against Pakistan. You just have to turn them around towards Pakistan, and they can be used against Pakistan.
So we have to go by capability and not by intentions, because intentions can change. But let me pull in Dr. Kamran Bokhari also. Dr. Bokhari, we were basically talking about the fact that India is fast-pacing its R&D, its development, its acquisition of weapon systems and platforms that obviously are a matter of concern for us in Pakistan, given the geopolitical situation here, given the sort of conflictual model, given the fact that there is no, right now as we speak, there is no dialogue framework. So give me your sense of how this is likely to unfold in terms of increasing instability in a region that's already unstable.
So, Ejaz, I think that the principle of perceptions and misperceptions applies here very, very, if you will, heavily. Because, whatever each side does, whether it's the Indians or the Pakistanis, they do it based on a perceived move on the part of the other. So clearly there's been a lot of showcasing from the Indian side of advances in military technology, hardware, and so on and so forth. So once that happens, it's only natural for Pakistan to say, okay, let's adjust, because ultimately there is that perpetual need to maintain balance or at least some semblance of parity, even if it isn't a balance. I think that Pakistan being economically far weaker and the pressures on Pakistan, both domestic and international, increased that sense of vulnerability in Islamabad. And so this is only natural. And until both sides come down and de-escalate and say, okay, let's climb down from the mountaintop or the hill that we have, we find ourselves today, I think this is going to continue.
But I agree with, before you joined us, Brigadier Salik was talking about this, a number of sort of proposals when we actually did have a dialogue framework, those 8 baskets. We had put forward certain proposals in terms of identifying categories of certain missiles, certain other platforms that perhaps we could agree on in terms of the numbers or in terms of not having them. But India shunned all of that, and their argument is that this is not for you guys. I mean, this is for China. I mean, and I'm talking about the time when there was nothing between India and China going on.
I mean, look, what they say publicly, it's very well known. Any actor, its public statements need to be taken with a heavy grain of salt, because it is for perception shaping, both domestically and internationally. And everyone knows that any public statements are meant to obfuscate.
No, but geez, I'm not talking. I'm talking about the public statements alone. I'm talking about when Sherpas sat together across the table and talked about these things. This was what the Indians said. We have to look at China.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying, when I say here is statements, I mean, in this case, you're talking about face-to-face statements. We don't expect, either side does not expect the other to be, forthright or forthcoming. Obviously, there is going to be a withholding and a lot of withholding. So that until that there is this mistrust, deep mistrust, which over the past many years has increased, especially in recent years. And so you're right. I mean, when they say that, this is for China, the Pakistanis look at that and say, well, you don't do anything against China. And as the Brigadier was just saying, even now, with everything happening on the LAC, we haven't seen the deployment of heavy weapons. And let's face it, look at the terrain and the topography of the India-China border. It's a difficult one. And you're not going to have that kind of deployment. You mentioned the 3 strike corps versus 1 on the China border. There are topographical and terrain, factors that inform that decision. And of course, the flat terrain that the Indians and the Pakistanis share, at least in Punjab, is the reason why they have that. So I think the situation isn't the solution isn't military in the sense that you buy more weapons because you keep doing that and you're not going anywhere. Best case scenario is
unfortunately, KB, that's something one has to tell India, because India takes the lead, and then obviously, as you said yourself, given the adversarial relations, then Pakistan has to respond, at least in terms of ratios and to ensure that the strategies of coercion do not kick into play. But thank you so much to Brigadier Dr. Naeem Salik. Thank you to Dr. Kamran Bokhari for speaking with us. We shall take a short break and return to discuss the visit to Qatar by Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani. Stay with us. Welcome back to In Focus. Our second story tonight is about the visit to Qatar by Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani. Ghani arrived in Doha on a two-day bilateral visit on Monday. The visit comes at a time when crucial talks are going on between Taliban and the Afghan government delegation on how to work out a peace and power-sharing formula. While Ghani will not be meeting any Taliban leader, observers say that his visit is primarily aimed at getting Qatar to lean on the Taliban for expediting peace talks. Violence has not abated, even as Afghan negotiators have been engaged in direct talks for the first time. Scores of Afghan soldiers and Taliban fighters have been killed in intense clashes, and suicide attacks have left dozens of civilians dead in recent weeks. To discuss the significance of Ghani's visit and how effective it could be, we are joined by Raheemullah Yusufzai, resident editor of the news and a keen watcher of developments in Afghanistan. We also have with us Hamdullah Hamdard, an Afghan journalist and analyst. Let me begin with Mr. Hamdard here. Mr. Hamdard, how do you look at President Ghani's visit and what the observers are saying, that this is primarily to try and get the Qataris to lean on the Taliban to expedite the process?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that this visit was a two-day visit. On the first day, President Ghani visited the Emir of Kuwait, and he paid homage in condolences for the death of the late Emir of Kuwait to the current Emir of Kuwait, who is his brother. And then he went to Qatar, met the Emir of Qatar and also the Prime Minister of Qatar to strengthen the fraternal and friendly ties between Qatar and Afghanistan. The main part was to work on the friendly ties between the two countries, as well as he had planned to visit and meet the Afghanistan, Islamic Republic of Afghanistan's negotiating team to talk to them about the obstacles and about the stalemate that is currently there, to break the stalemate or the deadlock and to continue the negotiation with the Taliban. Probably there were some issues that had to be referred to President Ghani, and probably the negotiating team needed his advice in this regard. Beside that, he was also planned to address a gathering at the Doha Institute that would be attended by some diplomats, students, and academics, and other people there at Doha. The main thing is that this visit of President Ghani will definitely expedite the peace negotiating process between the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan's peace negotiators and the Taliban's team. And hopefully he will be able to break the stalemate or the deadlock which has happened or which is currently there. And since the last 6 days, there was no official meeting between the two negotiating teams. And hopefully President Ghani's visit will have will affect this process and will break this deadlock. That is expected by the people and by us, by all Afghans here in Afghanistan. However, he did not have to plan. He did not have in his plan to visit or to meet the delegation of the Taliban negotiating team. This might be something that at least Mullah Ubaidullah, the head of the Taliban movement, has to visit the Taliban negotiating team, or has to guide them or direct them or instruct them to break this deadlock and to make sure that they continue the speaking on or negotiating on the rules of this negotiation. Both teams have to agree on that before they can proceed with the peace negotiations between the Taliban and the Afghanistan, Islamic Republic of Afghanistan.
Right. Thank you so much. That was Hamdullah Hamdard speaking with us. Let me go to Mr. Yusufzai. Raheemullah Yusufzai, how do you look at the visit? Mr. Hamdard talked about Ghani's other engagements. But the fact is that it seems that the central point of the visit has to do with the talks.
Yes, I think he needed to update himself and learn firsthand from the Afghan government negotiating team as to what was happening. I'm sure he already has a lot of information about the peace talks, but it will be, I think, much better if he meets them personally and finds out about the stalemate and the issues which have been discussed. Secondly, I believe that Afghanistan's relations with Qatar in the past have not been very friendly because the Afghan government was not happy that Qatar has hosted the Taliban Political Commission and an increasing number of their Shura members. And, Afghanistan, Mr. Cdre also, they tried to, persuade Taliban or the US to shift the Taliban office from Qatar to Turkey or Saudi Arabia or the UAE or wherever. So there was some problem between the two countries, but now I believe those issues have been resolved because the peace talks are being held in Qatar and Taliban want to stay there and use Qatar as the venue for the talks. Another, I think, point which must be uppermost in the mind of Mr. Ghani was that it looked as if Abdullah had overshadowed him. Abdullah has paid visit to Qatar. He was there on 12th September when the intra-Afghan negotiations started. He was there at the inauguration ceremony. Then he came to Pakistan on a 3-day visit after a gap of 12 long years. And, the visit was very positive on both sides. And then now today, Abdullah has gone to India. So I think that, Abdullah was traveling. He was making the headlines, while the president, who has more powers, he was, I think, overshadowed. So he thought that he must also get into action, and he has to go to Qatar where all the action is taking place.
Right. So this is an interesting observation, Mr. Yusufzai, that this is like a three-pronged thing. One, trying to normalize further with Qatar. One, to apprise himself of what's going on as far as the talks are concerned. And third, to try and ensure that he also gets the share of the headlines. But how do you, now that this has happened and he's there, how do you look at the prospect of talks resuming and getting expedited in terms of setting down the rules of how this will proceed further?
Ejaz Haider Sahab, you must have followed certain media reports quoting members of the Afghan negotiating team. And they are saying that certain countries are trying to mediate. You may already have also followed the statement given by the acting US ambassador in Kabul. He offered mediation if the two sides agree. And there were reports that, Norway, Qatar, Pakistan, maybe even China, they are trying to mediate because they want the talks to proceed and to make progress. So I think that, there is a stalemate, and that's why there were no talks for 6 days. But I am sure that the talks will resume. I know that the talks will not end at this stage. We may not be able to see much progress, but I think that, they will keep trying, they will keep talking. And I think, Ashraf Ghani's visit will also help because he must have asked Qatar to play its role as a mediator. Qatar has got a lot of influence on Taliban. It has been hosting the Taliban Political Commission since 2010. Yeah. And now, as we all know, 65% of the Taliban Shura members, Leadership Council members, are being hosted by Qatar. So, Qatar may be small, but it is always punching above its weight.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely. Thanks so much. That was Raheemullah Yusufzai speaking with us with reference to President Ashraf Ghani's visit to Qatar. But this is all from In Focus tonight. We shall see you tomorrow at the same time. Keep following our latest updates on social media at indus.news. Good night and goodbye.